Now our first panel discussion is coming up. You can ask questions again. The topic is modern slavery online, the dirty business of online abuse of children. If you have questions to our speakers, Father Shay Cullen, Roy Deason, Manfred Paulus, or Peter Dupont, you can use the Q&A tab right under your streaming window. For the perpetrators, it is exciting. It's a way to show their power, but for the children, it's horrible.
Sie wurden gerettet aus den Fängen von Vergewaltigung.
They were rescued from the clutches of rapists and online sexual abusers. The girls find refuge here at the Preda Child Protection Center in the Philippines. Trauma therapy is a lengthy but healing process. One of the girls is named Paloma. She was 13 and wanted to earn some money as a babysitter. The job offer was a trap. A man tells her that her job has something to do with computers and that she should dress nicely. He leads her into a large room with other girls sitting in front of screens. When we got there, I thought it was a bit strange. There were girls sitting there, and they were dressed very sexy. Paloma does not understand what is happening to her. In front of the internet camera, she has to do what she's told, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. The men on the other end of the line are as old as Paloma's father. They give their perverted orders from afar, from the US, from Germany, and many other countries. Experts fear that at any given moment, some 750,000 of these perpetrators are searching for minors on the internet. In a police raid, Paloma is freed. She's taken into the Preda Center, founded by Father Shay Cullen and supported by Missio. Here they find a new life. They should get hope for their future again, a life full of joy and happiness again. They are allowed to recover here. They receive all the help they need to free themselves from the trauma. Self-defense classes turn them into strong girls. Missio project partner Roy Deason has started a protection program for children and their parents. She cares for poor families who struggle to survive as day laborers in a cemetery. Because they do not have money for an apartment, they sleep between the graves at night. Roy Deason warns the families about those people who say, you can make a lot of money in front of a webcam. With her education and protection program, the Missio project partner has reached thousands of children and families and has saved them from the internet perpetrators. All of that shows how important education locally is in order to fight against sexualized violence and online abuse. And Father Shay's Preda Center helps. Father Shay Cullen is committed against sex tourism and has done that for over 50 years. Those tourists come to the Philippines for violence and abuse of children. He was nominated for the Peace Nobel Peace Prize many times. Now he's coming to us live from the Philippines. It's lovely to have you, Father Shay.
Yes, hello, good afternoon.
You have prepared a couple of words, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay. So shall I begin my presentation?
Okay. Yes, please.
Very good. I am Father Shay Cullen. I'm speaking to you from the Preda Foundation in the Philippines. I founded this organization in 1974, and its mission and goal is to rescue, protect, heal, and defend the rights of children and women, and especially those children sexually abused and exploited online, and to bring traffickers and abusers to justice. We work in cooperation with many organizations for many years, like Missio, our close partner, and agencies in German government and fair trade organizations like Wealth Partner and GEPA, And it's the fair trade connection also helps us to fund our projects for children. The live streaming of child sexual abuse and the proliferation of child abuse material and images that leads to the sexual abuse and the rape of children has greatly expanded during the pandemic. Although the arrivals of international child sex tourists has fallen in the Philippines during the pandemic, there are still resident foreign visitors around the Philippines, and the online child sexual abuse has grown greatly. We all know child sexual abuse is a terrible and horrific secret crime done alone online, where weak and vulnerable children are abused by irresponsible parents and relatives, mostly for paying customers from developed nations in Europe, the USA, and Australia. The money sending courier services, they also play a part in this, making payments to the abusers, and they have a responsibility to monitor and report the accounts that they are receiving, given to suspicious customers. The money sending courier have to be some way controlled. For many, this is the worst crime of child abuse, since it is hard to detect whenever brave and courageous children and child defenders and advocates are fighting back. And advocates are like Missio, working with us, are helping greatly to control this terrible abuse. The internet has made it possible to easily abuse a child online nowadays. And as of July 2016, it was found out there's about 40% of the world's population was online. So that's nearly 3.5 billion internet users. And now there's so much more are online using the internet. So researchers have also learned that there are approximately 200 million girls and 100 million boys actually on the internet, and they will be sexually victimized before they become adults. So it's a huge number of them, and they will be groomed and sexually abused by contacts made through the internet online. And so grooming is really the preparation for the abuse of the children. So let's ask how can it happen, or this preparation for the exploitation and abuse of children online. Grooming is by persuasion and trust building. They have to establish a relationship with the victim. And the most prolific way that children are sexually abused and exploited online is through the persuasion by the pedophile. It is also the way images of children who have been sexually exposed are photographed online, and they are then used, the pictures are used for the sexual gratification of the grooming pedophiles. And they share them with many other pedophiles, and the images can be used in a bad way, of course, not only for viewing of the victims, but for extortion. We call this sextortion, because the teenagers can be forced to pay money to those who are threatening them, continue exposing themselves online under threat that their images will be posted to their parents, their friends, to their peers, and they are really scared of this, and even be posted on Facebook. So the poor teenagers, some of them are scared and they pay money, and we must realize this is also a crime. And Pope Francis has now marked grooming of child victims by clerics, priests, and church lay leaders as a very serious crime in canon law. So it's marked in church law now as a serious crime, and also the sexual exploitation of vulnerable adults is part of that. And the possession of child sexual abuse material is also a very serious crime. So we're all very challenged to do this. And we've heard recently in Germany, the Archbishop of Munich is speaking about the child sexual abuse. So bishops everywhere must really robustly and investigate reports of abuse by whoever, and especially by priests and clerics and lay people in the church, and show greater concern for the child victims and not to focus themselves on trying to protect and shield the so-called reputation of the institutional Catholic Church, or even some of the clerics, which was a common practice in the past. And actually, it still goes on today, I'm sad to say. And this must be really stopped, and we have to follow Pope Francis strongly in this and admire his commitment and his dedication to protecting children. So the way it happens, grooming and the abuse online, is that 18% of pedophiles has been discovered. Those who are desiring to get sexual gratification from watching a minor being abused or exposing themselves online, what they do is they crawl on the internet and they find email addresses of children and chat rooms, and they send messages to the minors inviting them to be friends. About 82% of the online crimes against children by the pedophiles, they make contact to the victims through social networking sites that the children use. They get their Facebook accounts and they use the messaging online to contact the children. So they send messages like, hi, you are so cute. You look very beautiful. Can we be friends? They mostly pose as young adults themselves, like boyfriends. They flatter and they praise their target victims for looking good, you're beautiful, clever, you're smart. So they spend about 45% of their time grooming by building up this trusting relationship with the child victim. They convince the child that they are a true and caring friend. So the children, especially those with unloving and caring parents, they can be weak in self-confidence, and they may be victims of bullying in school, and they can easily fall for flattery and making new friends online. So the grooming can be very effective by these pedophiles. So 75% of the victims of online grooming and abuse are females. And they go online privately, secretly, to conduct these relationships unknown to their parents and unknown to adults or teachers. They use passwords, of course, to hide their involvement with their special friends. And so the groomers, they can be of any age from 18 to 60 years old. That's been uncovered by research. And some pedophiles, they pose as teenagers and they establish boyfriends or girlfriend relationships and offer, this is the greatest problem for many of these young teenagers, they share photos of each other. And they, you show me yours and I show you mine. So they send these nude photos of each other, in sexually provocative poses, for example. And the young girl is believing that she's really talking to a very nice groomer, a very nice boyfriend. And these photos and images on video are copied by the abuser and the groomer, and then it's turned against the child. And these groomers, they threaten to post them to friends and family and use the video and the photographs to blackmail the youth for either money, but some of them use it as an excuse to meet with the children and pressure them to have sex with them or even with a friend. They set it up for others in this way. So some youths have committed suicide. It's so tragic as a result of this terrible pressure. And we just don't know how many because it's never reported. It's a secret crime against a child. And it's really going on everywhere, actually, all over the internet. But people are too ashamed, right, to report it and too ashamed to take action. So even young children are victims of internet online sexual abuse. And the posting of this child sexually abused images of children, we have 9 and 10-year-old children can now view these terrible images online on their smartphones. And as a result, they are aroused, even no matter how young, at an early age, and they can abuse younger children. Here in Subic, just a few months ago, a young boy viewed the sexually abusive videos online on his cell phone. He was 10 years old. And then with another 11 years old and 12, they all viewed the same images, and then they gang raped a 6-year-old girl. So this is just an example of one of hundreds and hundreds of such child abuse. In another case we have here in Santa Cruz, Zambales, north of Preda Center, is a 13-year-old boy. He too was the same, and a 6-year-old girl was his victim after viewing online these images. And also we conducted a survey quite recently ourselves, a small, very small survey between 23 teenagers. And they said they had become very sexually aware at a very young age and were actively abusing others after they had watched online pornography, adult pornography, but some of it was with very, very young girls. So they were only 7 years old, 7 to 13 years old out of those 23 teenagers. And they had all viewed, these images online. And it drove them or, motivated them to go out and abuse another child younger than them. So now, why is this happening? Because all of these images are easily available. Right on streaming, it's online, and they're passing through the internet server providers, the ISPs. Now, these are, they unlock the internet and make all of these abuse materials available to any of the children because they are destroying many, many children. So the internet server providers, and they allow it to happen, in fact, because they refuse to block it and install the available powerful blocking software that is very, very capable of identifying these images and using artificial intelligence, in fact. And there's also web crawlers, a very powerful software that can identify abusive images and block them immediately. But the ISPs are not doing that. In fact, all of these stuff are being shared throughout the internet. Now, there is a blocking service by a charity. The ISPs, even around the world, in the UK, everywhere, they're relying on the Internet Watch Foundation. So the Internet Watch Foundation is a charity, but it's supported financially by government and by the ISPs themselves. And they are really doing the work which the ISPs should do. And I am really campaigning quite vigorously in the media to hold the ISPs responsible for this, because they are the ones who really permit it. And they don't want to install this software. In the Philippines, we have law, which I helped to draft with a senator, Jambi Madrigal, in 2009. It was passed. And this mandates that the ISPs should install this blocking software, but they have refused to do it since 2009. And now this law is being revised and hopefully will be strengthened so that the fine, the payment that they should make when they do not comply with the law will be very, very strict and much more much bigger than what it is now. This was a loophole that they made in the law during the final discussion before they passed that law. So these are just something that we are now doing in trying to combat this, is campaigning everywhere that the ISPs are responsible and they are the ones who really must take action to protect these children. There's a story also of 11-year-old Jasmine. It's not her real name, of course, but Jasmine, she was a child, her childhood ended. She was groomed online by one of these guys pretending to be her boyfriend and persuaded by this guy to send nude photos of herself to him in sexy poses. showing her private parts. And he even promised to send her money, through this courier service. And she used her cell phone and she videoed herself and she sent it to him. And only later she realized she'd been cheated. This guy was a scammer and he scammed her, got her photos, her videos, her pictures, and threatened to put them online and send them to all her friends. And she was devastated. And like many, many young people are, shocked. They're only 11 years old. What does she know? No, but she had been watching also, these sort of sexy online movies of young girls doing the same thing. And that's why she went along with it. She had been influenced by this online business of young people sharing pictures and videos of themselves in, a delicate way. So this is just of the many of the cases at Preda. She was brought to us at the Preda Foundation, totally distraught and desperate. And she was actually sexually abused later in her community. We're not sure if the rapist of this little 11-year-old child had actually seen her on the internet. But she was traumatized. But anyway, we have a healing process for these children, because many of these victims of human trafficking and of child abuse actually are first groomed on the online. And this is how they get sexually abused. And she was raped. She was able to express her deepest pain and hurt and anger during the emotional release therapy that we have at Preda. You saw in the video earlier. And this is really very, very successful for these children. They really let out all of the anger, their hatred, their anger. They beat the cushions as if they're attacking their abuser. And it's for victims of rape and victims of human trafficking, it's the same. They get it all out and they become very self-confident, and they get empowered, and they're able to be strong enough to give their statements to the police and with the social workers. And then they're strong enough to testify in the court against their abusers. And this is the very important thing we have to do nationally and internationally, is really upgrade our legal commitment and our work for justice. And we have to bring these rapists and pedophiles really all the more to justice. I remember I brought a German guy to justice in Iserlohn many years ago. He only got 2.5 years. He raped a 9-year-old child in the Philippines and escaped. But we brought the case under the extraterritorial jurisdiction law, which I was active in helping to pass with ECPAT. It was a campaign in those days. But now it's not active anymore, because the level of evidence is not available and is not acceptable in the courts when it's only provided, we say, by local police. So we really need to have the federal police active here in the Philippines as elsewhere. We have a new police officer here in Manila, and they're talking to us at Preda because we can really help them. Because once we have the victims in our custody, which under the law we have the duty and obligation to protect them, and we can protect and help them and empower them to testify, and we get lots of convictions. So this is, the children, if they're given the chance to give testimony, they will tell the story. They can overcome the trauma. Even 3-year-old kids and a 6-year-old, two sisters abused by their biological father, they testified and spoke in the court, and he was convicted. He got life sentence. So, and the children were able to, deal with that emotional trauma in their lives. So pursuing justice in the courts is really vital and so important for success in overcoming this terrible crime. So at the moment, yes.
Vielen Dank schon mal, Father Shay. Wir haben die Problematik, ich unterbreche Sie nur sehr, sehr ungern, I'm sorry to interrupt you, and we have people from Australia also on the conference, and we will be late if we don't stop your speech now. And you will have the opportunity later on in our discussion to give us more in-depth insights into the cases. And these cases are really, really terrible. It is the responsibility of the ISPs. They need to be held accountable. And we have a lot of questions coming in from Rome, from Mumbai, from everywhere. Somebody is asking, what is the difference between the traditional understanding of slavery and modern slavery? Peter Dupont, maybe you can answer.
Die alten Formen der Sklaverei sind verboten und illegal. Moderne Sklaverei ist einfach starke Ausbeutung und ist häufig unsichtbar. Menschen, die in Fabriken arbeiten, die zur Sexarbeit gezwungen werden, das ist ein globales Phänomen, wirklich.
Sehr vielen Dank schon mal.
Thank you very much. You are an investigative journalist, and you have worked with and have fought against sexual violence and child trafficking. You actually contributed to 15 children who were freed, and you managed to actually get perpetrators and brought them to court, even though what they did, their crimes, they happened in very private spaces, away from the public. Mr. Dumont, you prepared a speech, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Wie gesagt, ich bin investigativer Journalist. In den letzten 6 Jahren habe ich
sometimes directing the abuse and exploitation of a child. And they are paying for it also. So I've worked as an undercover with NGOs, with law enforcement, and also with media. Just a month ago, I founded together with my colleague Victor a new organization. You can maybe show picture 1. And this new organization is UCF, of Underground Child Foundation. It is based on years of experience fighting this kind of crime, stopping criminals, and liberating children. In that capacity, we have also worked with Father Shea in a specific case, and we are a big admirer of his hands-on approach. Difference between us and other organizations is simple. We are lean and we are very flexible. We like to do things. We don't like to talk a lot. We don't like to make a lot of reports, but we want to have results. What we also do is we work child-centric. It's not about us, it's about the child. And culture-specific, meaning that the remedies of the West for this kind of crime do not often work in other parts of the world, so mind the culture. Let me start with some good news, and then we go to slide 2. Good news is that this man, a Norwegian man, has been recently convicted to 13 years of prison. And the man paid a family to watch the abuse and exploitation of several girls for quite some time. He was 12,000 kilometers away from the house where this happened, and it was on the island of Mindanao. And this abuse was live streamed, so he was following it and directing it. When he started this abuse, there were 5 girls he was exploiting, and I will just read their names and their ages. Kit was 11 years old, Maria was 12, Nia was 14, Lyra was only 7, and Shira was 12. This paid abuse lasted for 3 years until I got these girls rescued together with 7 other girls in 2015. After I had personally visited that house and established what was really happening there. And I saw that they had hundreds of customers, mostly Westerners from United States, but also from Europe and from Australia. So I alerted the Norwegian police also about this guy because I noticed that after the rescue of the girls, nothing happened with the customers. No one seemed particularly interested in investigating them. Now he is, and that's very good news, he is convicted and he has to pay the survivors between 10,000 and 20,000 euro, which is for the girls really a life-changing experience. Slide 3, you see here a typical image from a barangay. Girls like this are being exploited online quite often, and I can say, and I can really confirm what Father Shea is saying, COVID, the pandemic really made it much, much worse. The Norwegian case is interesting because it is typical of cases like this, and it's also special. Typical is that men like the Norwegian, they don't have a specific profile. So this man was like an influential man. He was rich, he was respected, he was a good citizen, he had a child. Second typical is that it shows how difficult it is to find these men. Yeah? If you simply trust only technology to track down these people, you will not find them. And me and my team, we are specialized in finding those people you cannot normally find. Mostly with technology, you find the curious cats. That's people who are really, for the first time, interested in this and are simply stupid in going online, stupid to be found by artificial intelligence. And typical also is that it takes a very long time to prosecute these people and get them to jail. Like, I told the Norwegian police about him in 2016. He was just recently convicted. Special is that it can be done. You really can find these people, no problem about it, but you have to do a lot of effort and spend a lot of time in it. I work together, for example, with very good investigative journalists from Norway. One article alerted the Department of Justice. The second journalist, he found a method focusing on financial data to track down people who are sending regularly money to the Philippines for abuse. So the essence is that collaboration between NGOs, media, and law enforcement really can have good results. Let me see. Now, next slide. If you see this, how did I find this Norwegian? These girls, for example, belonged to the pimps, the traffickers, the handlers who were using and abusing a lot of girls in that cybersex den. In the summer of 2013, 3 men were watching their computer, and these men were watching a show. A naked man on a bed together with an 11-year-old child. Of the 3 men, there was this Norwegian guy was one, another one was a British man, and the third man, he hid himself, you couldn't see it. There was also a woman present in that room, and she was going to participate in the show. So the British guy directed them, he told them what to do and how to abuse this little girl. Now, that woman made one mistake. Just before she was going to do something, she called another possible customer, and this guy was given to her by this man. If you take the next slide, this man is the American Anthony Schultz, and Anthony Schultz introduced a new customer to that cybersex den. That new customer was me. So what happened for the rest is history. 12 girls were rescued in that cybersex den by the Philippine police. I worked with them as a poser customer. And because nothing happened with the European, American, and Australian customers, I started to track them down myself. And I got some of them convicted. It's very difficult, but it's doable. And this guy was one of them, Anthony Schultz. This was my first case, and it gave me an insight into what was happening because it was really difficult, you know. So I had to travel to the Philippines myself. I had contact with the family, and I had, for the first time, an inclination of what this crime really was. So while I was there, I was offered also minors. Next slide, you see 5 girls. They tried to sell to me. Those girls were all employed in sex work, like online sexual child exploitation, and they were also offered offline for real sexual hands-on abuse. It was a very strange thing because in 2013, when I wrote an article about this cyber sex den, and it was a series, I had tried to stop the family that was doing this. I had taken their accounts, I had changed their passwords, I had blocked everything, and I threatened them. I told them I'm a journalist and I'm going to report you if you're not going to stop. At that time, I didn't know it was a family of 6. I thought a family of 2. But it appeared that they just continued after everything I had told them. And so I had to go there, made a book about it, made a film about it, and learned for the first time what this crime really is. What I also learned is that law enforcement is having difficulties with cases like this. Difficulties to find these people, these traffickers, to find these girls, and also to find their customers, which is very important. Between this first case, 2015, and my last one in 2021, I was involved in lots of cases in more than 10 countries. Here also in Aachen, I had a meeting with the BKA for a German who was called Gunther. And Gunther was, if you can see at the next slide, Gunther was a customer of Jerry Arras, a man who's called the cyber sex demon of Manila. And Arras, 2 of these girls here, very young, 12, 13 years old, were offered to the German in his condo in Manila. When Arras was arrested in 2014, the German fled to his home in Hong Kong, and police was not able, despite my going here to Aachen, to arrest him because there is no way they're giving data to police in Hong Kong or in China or whatsoever. So the man is still not arrested. For the past 4 years, I've worked with a team, and we were specialized in finding these people. What we had to do was to rescue children, to stop people who were abusing them, to find ways to deal more efficiently with and holistically with OSEG, and as they call it in the Philippines, online sexual exploitation of children, and to build a network. That is very challenging, I can say. And that is why we founded the Underground Child Foundation, because we can work quickly and we know what is happening in the field. We are very hands-on. For many organizations, that's a problem. Now, just to tell you briefly, who are the people we are finding? Who are the customers? Who are the Westerners who are doing this? Well, for example, there was a technician we found. He paid for the torture and the murder of children. There was a porn producer who rented minors for his films. There was a journalist, a media man who abused every time he went to the Philippines, and it was twice a year, he abused more than 10 minors. There was a translator who went to live in the Philippines to abuse minors, and you can see him at the next slide, who this man is. And we worked with Father Shea to get this man arrested. And then there was, for example, a coffee importer who was traveling to the Philippines for hands-on abuse. Our perspective doing these cases changed a lot, and it changed because of the children, because we heard about their stories, we interviewed them a lot, we did investigations in the neighborhood, talked to the families and whatever, and we learned what really happened in their lives. I will briefly tell you about 2 of them. One of them is Anna, and Anna is from the Isle of Mindanao. You can see at the next slide, this is Anna. On the left side, you see Anna as she was working in the cyber sex den in 2015. And on the right side, you see her now. After she was rescued, she was in a shelter. She has a baby now. She's having a better life, despite the fact that COVID is really making things difficult for survivors of online sexual child exploitation and abuse. So Anna was a child from a dysfunctional family, very poor, 11 children. And she was groomed by a Filipino woman, a neighbor, to start showing herself on webcam to customers. And she got sweets for that, and she got shoes. Her parents didn't know in the beginning. Then it changed. The mother knew, and she accepted it because it gave the family a small amount of money. The father didn't agree, and he left the family for good, and he never came back, which is also very strange. So she did that just to survive. When I met Anna in 2015, she was already very used to that work. She was also recruiting girls herself. It was like normal sex work for her. And she had a lot of customers, Westerners, who were also buying her videos and buying her pictures. She was one of the most important girls in that cyber sex den. And they were exploiting over the years more than 30, even more than 40 boys and girls. So then she was rescued in 2015. She was rehabilitated in a shelter, helped by an NGO. And now she's living somewhere with her child. She's also separated from her friend. And we are helping her because with small micro funding, you can really improve the life of these girls. And we're trying to find a good job for her because she got an education. The good thing is of these people that were abusing her, a lot of people were arrested, and she's at ease, she's at peace with that. It makes her happy. She really hopes a Norwegian who exploited her will, pay her and change her life. The next is case of 2019, finished in 2021. This is the family of LV, and you see LV on the right. When I met LV, she was 15. She was offered to me for abuse by a pimp, belonged to a network of traffickers of pimps. Also her sister, she had been exploited, and she belonged to a group of 25 children being exploited online in Taguig, a part of Manila. Her best customer, the guy who paid most, was a Danish media man who committed suicide while I was investigating him in the Philippines. She was never really rescued because the police only arrested part of the group and rescued only 9 of the 25 children. So we stepped in and secured that LV could study because she's a top student and that her family can live without manipulation of pimps and other people. The problem is, of those children that were rescued by the police, some of them already returned to their families and are being exploited again. And many of the customers are not being investigated. So we learned from between 2015 and 2021, we learned a lot of things. One is that technology alone cannot tackle this problem. Technology alone cannot help these children. There is a strong belief in artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is very good, but it does not really improve the lives of minors. So you should have also real investigation, boots on the ground investigation, as we call it. And that's what we do with Underground Child Foundation. We make reports with hard data, give it to the police so people can be prosecuted. And also we try to help families like this, not by getting them arrested, for example, because it happens, but by making sure they can study, they can live in a normal way, and there is room to heal and to develop. We found out also that arrests are traumatizing. If you're a child, they always say, and you're abused, the police will rescue you. They will kick in a door, they will take away your mother, they will put you in a shelter. You stay there for years, you never see your mother again, and this is really causing huge trauma for these children. So if you want to tackle this problem, you really have to understand what this is all about. You have to go to the Philippines, for example. You have to be there to talk to the stakeholders, to everyone involved, to investigate. If you see on the slide, this is what we are doing. It's Manila Harbor, Baseco area. And then you can really make a difference. So the story about online sexual child exploitation, as it has been told until now, is not really very accurate. It's not often only about very scared girls watching a camera and there is a voice coming out of the computer. The story is much more complex. Yeah? And next slide, you see girls who were rescued by us together with Father Shea. And to conclude, I will just tell you something about the customers and the people who are abusing these children. It's a continuum. It's a broad spectrum. On the one hand, you have the very poor mothers who are doing this maybe once, twice, whatever, just showing their naked children to get some money to survive, to be able to not live in the street. On the other hand, you have the monsters. And the monsters are also mothers who are, for example, bringing their children to a hotel to service a Western customer for a week. And the child is 7 or 8 years old, for example. Or you have the guys the Westerners who go there to really heavily abuse children, like Anthony Schultz, showed you him before, and also Jerry Arras, the monster of Manila, who did the most terrible things. So what we learned is like this: get up, stand up, speak up. If you see the next slide, do something, but also give these girls, these boys, a voice. Don't make them numbers in a report. Don't give them the feeling that they are just, unimportant. Let them speak, give them a place and let them grow. Now, we heard the number of 750,000 people looking for this kind of abuse every moment of the day. The possible number is, I think, bigger. It's more huge. And the million-dollar question is, how do you stop this? How do you do that? We heard Father Shea with some solutions. We know prevention, awareness is very important. And we know you have to start somewhere, And that's why if you see this petition from Missio, this is a very good start. Raising awareness nationally, also internationally, and together to combat this phenomenon, just people, media, law enforcement, and NGOs, and then you can really make a difference. Thank you.
Sehr, sehr vielen Dank für Ihre Ausführungen und auch dafür,
Thank you very much for your explanations, and thank you also for putting the focus on victims and making sure that they're not numbers, that they have a personality, that there's people, that there's human beings behind there, and that every single one of them shall be talked about. We have great news from the Philippines. We have Roy Deason here. She is a Missio project partner. We're glad to have you, Roy Deason. You are also on board for the petition that we have. And of course, our participants can also sign on our website. Dear Roy Deason, what would you say about the victims? What would you like to tell us about your work?
Sexual online abuse. Hello and good afternoon.
I think the Philippines are very far away and the internet connection is not very good at the moment.
And all those present today.
Oh, I see her. Roy, I see you. Lovely to see you.
Issues that contributed to the proliferation in an alarming scale, the modern slavery our world is facing today. We are grateful for this opportunity to share with you the forms of modern slavery present in our areas of work and how this modern slavery has penetrated in our lives, especially the needy. For our discussion later on, the team will help me answering your questions. So we have Fernan, Lani, Irene, John, and me working as part-time. Father Max is also involved. Our country, the Philippines, where most people are poor and have many children, the struggle to survive daily is always an uphill battle. to have food at table every day is a concern not only for the parents but also for the children, who at a tender age are already taught and learn to take care of their younger siblings. And for now, it is not only food that is being needed. School support is also wanted. And with the COVID-19, the health protection is an added challenge. The easy access to internet, the easy connection to internet, the means to survive for poor people has taken a more sophisticated yet hideous forms. We know the poor, they lack the necessary skills and education to compete in the world of work dominated by the learned and the skilled. And so they have less access to resources to survive. And that is why they are forced to live in places that are free, like the cemeteries, the slums, and dump sites. So some have find recourse to exploitation of their own kin to survive. This vulnerable and helpless situation is exploited by pimps and pedophiles, not only from the Philippines, but also from countries all over the world. This is the new danger beside poverty in our slums, modern slavery in the form of sexual online exploitation. And in the Philippines, they found the supply because of many vulnerable children. The facilitators can either use the standard computer or laptop or just the mobile phones, which are easy to acquire. The cost of the second-hand mobile phones are abundantly sold even in the sidewalks, and it costs only between 20 to 50 euro, which are already considered high-end gadgets. In our work, we discovered that there are three kinds of facilitators and different reasons for engaging in online sexual commercial exploitation of children. One kind of facilitator is the direct relative of the victim, the other is a classmate or friend, and the other is herself or himself, which is tantamount to cyber prostitution, also a slavery. Most of our partners are engaged in odd jobs and thus lack stability. They usually earn between 2 to 8 euro a day, the Philippine exchange rate of between 56 to 57 pesos a euro, which is really insufficient for a family of 6. There are also those who have stable jobs and earn a daily wage of 8 euro. The minors engaged in online prostitution receive money in varying amounts depending, according to them, their ability to sweet talk their friends. The showing of their body parts is done little by little, and the amount increases as the bearing of their body progresses. It starts with 5 euro and would go as high as 1,000 euros. These minors have a pool of online customers for their online prostitution so as to keep their income steady and high. The reasons? Helping their family have food and to provide for their vanity. Children, especially the Filipino children, feel obliged and responsible to help their parents provide sustenance for the family. And this is being exploited by the facilitators. So a family who borrowed a significant amount of money from a relative and then failed to pay it on time, that relative would surreptitiously ask the teenage daughter, aged 13, to pay for what the parents owed to them. And then the child, who is 13, willing to help the parents get out of debt, would willingly obey. And this is manipulation. They ride on the vulnerable feeling of the child to help. And then there is another method, bribery. They deceive the children. The pimps offer the children a hamburger for a job. They then tell that they just have to look at the camera webcam for some time. Then they tell them to lift their skirt, to strip naked in front of the camera. So the naive and helpless children get deeper and deeper into the trap. This bribery technique is used for children below 8 years old using food, especially hamburger, which is a rare threat for them, and then money after the sexual acts. The children will be asked to keep it a secret between them, or she won't anymore get any hamburger and money to help her parents buy rice for the family. If the sexual acts are without physical pain, it usually continues until the time will get wine of its abomination. The other technique is deceitful recruitment of classmates who are poor. And the recruiter herself is also poor. And that recruiter, who is also a teenager, would invite the friend to go to their foreigner friend's house, and then the potential victim will be left after drinking a juice, and this potential victim would just woke up and find herself in uncompromising situation with a foreigner. She would also seize some video camera, but she has no inkling whether her pictures in uncompromising positions were taken. Then she would be assured that she will be given money to help her family and be kept in his company for a couple of days. Some young girls, as young as 9 years old, learn to engage in online sexual commercial exploitation of themselves to survive, and their online foreigner would entice them to invite their other young girlfriends in exchange for a fee. These young victims have developed a distorted view and unhealthy value of their own self-worth as person. What has become the priority is to survive, to be alive even at the expense of others. So we have this project with missio, and this program is anti-online abuse. In this missio project, we conceptualize that these young people be aware of their dignity as persons and their worth as human beings, even in the midst of want and poverty. That there are people that they don't know who care for them and want them to have a life much better than they have now, and that they have the capacity to cooperate to make their life better. They are also made aware of the psychological effects of these exploitations on themselves. And hopefully, the unknown facilitators of online sexual commercial exploitation of children are also made aware of the harm that they have inflicted on their victims. Our work entails a series of systematic and organized advocacy or awareness activities in the communities and in schools. Children are made aware on the modus operandi of facilitators in victimizing them. And we taught children to be empowered to protect themselves. And we also organize advocates against children abuses, either sexual or other forms of abuse, and influencing the local government officials and training them to enact ordinances against online sexual commercial exploitation of children, and the school administrators to include in their lessons this modern form of slavery, online sexual abuse, among others. For the youth, especially the girls, to know the power of the internet and its far-reaching audience in the whole world, and that pictures shared privately is actually being shared with others for a fee. We know that most of the criminals are foreigners. We hope that the German government, who have more resources than our government, have more sophisticated means in the prevention of these menace, would make available to all governments in the world the profile of these convicted pedophiles and have jump bail or persecution, and even those who are on trial, so as to warn our people when these pedophiles would attempt to make friends with them. laws enacted must really be implemented and not discriminatory. In our country, a bill against online sexual exploitation has passed in its second reading, and this is even long delayed in coming. Also, the ordinances for children protection or laws need to be more known to the general public so that they will know its provisions and its consequences or penalties. Politicians and law enforcement personnel themselves need to be oriented on child and women protection laws. In closing, we hope that this conference will produce tangible actions that will strengthen the efforts for children and women protection, and at the same time will create new strategies that will totally eradicate this modern slavery of online sexual exploitation. We also hope that you, missio, and the donors from Germany will continue to support our program of helping our young people have a better future through their schooling so that they will have a bigger chance to finding a more stable, decent, and good paying jobs. Again, we thank you very much for this chance of being able to help in increasing the urgency of acting against this modern slavery. Missio has prepared a petition to stop this modern slavery, and we are honored to sign this petition. So thank you very much, and this is the petition that we signed. Missio. God bless to us all.
Dear Roy Deason, thank you so much for you participating from the Philippines, for taking the time, for your work, and raising awareness for this important topic. We will continue here in Germany, and then we're going to have a discussion, and we'll come back to your questions also.
That we have signed.
And you can see the petition again here that everybody also in the audience can sign. Manfred Paulus, we continue here in Germany. You wrote a book on prostitution and human trafficking, and you have been working for more than 30 years as a detective chief superintendent, and you know that voluntary prostitution is only present in talk shows, not in real life. What states are affected, and how does this form of slavery work? And what about the situation in the Philippines? Thank you so much. I am delighted that Missio focuses on this topic. It is not a new topic, but it's very topical, more topical than ever before, probably. I do believe that due to the refugee movements in the world, especially children are not as protected as they should be. And we know from the past that wherever protection lacks or is not enough, this is where the abuse networks attack the children. And I think it's important that we talk about the sex slavery of children. Women are mostly affected. At the very beginning, I would like to say something about how to deal with this type of crime. And I would like to go back 20 years. In the year 2000, in Germany, and not only in Germany, we had major discussions, you know, with the criticism with regard to the Italian police. They did as follows. They set up a fake internet website. They showed soft child pornography, if this is possible. So they posted these pictures, and there were 1,500 pedophile perpetrators that were attracted by that website, and they were uncovered. There were a lot of people who were on a global level brought to court, and due to this approach, the Italians were massively criticized, and they investigated a porn group of Russia, and they used the so-called NAF videos, pornographic children videos, showing where videos that show children who are killed in this context, and that group was destroyed, that Russian group. So at the time, we took a look at that approach that was questionable, because this approach means that you disseminate child pornography, and that is a crime in itself. On the other side, you have to see, given that questionable approach, that made sure that these people, these perpetrators, were imprisoned. And if I think of that Russian group, I do believe that this approach helped to make sure that children were not killed. So this is something that we need to see. So I say that because I want to underline the different approaches how to deal with this type of crimes. And especially, it is always about how we deal with the children. So what about the protection of the children? How important is it to us? And we should focus on that again and again. In Germany, I worked as a detective sheep superintendent, and I would also like to shed a critical light on our approach in Germany with regard to children. And I think mandatory reporting should be mandatory. In Germany, thousands of people should be committed to the child protection, and they know about crimes done to children without the perpetrators being prosecuted. And this should not be, this must not be. Let me put it the other way around. In Germany, until now, only a coincidence decides whether a suspicion or a hint becomes public. And if we learn how people deal with the suspicion, if the police is involved or the prosecutor, for example, but if that hint is given to therapists, to physicians, and so on, it is not clear that they will start or launch a prosecution, because the criminal deed 213 of our legal situation, because the physicians, for example, are obliged to discretion and they refer to data protection, and this must not be. Child protection has to be prioritized. We have to find a balance between the two goods, of data protection and child protection. People justify this approach with the need to protect the victims, and I have a critical perspective. So if people say we cannot have these people, the children, be part of a legal prosecution, it would be too traumatizing. And I have a different perspective, because at the criminal police forces, we know that it is very important to protect the victims also. So we need to find a balance between the different approaches. And with regard to Germany, I wish for a mandatory reporting when it comes to severe crimes. And if we cannot excuse repetition, because we all know that these perpetrators repeat document their crimes. And this mandatory reporting is something that already exists in Austria or in France. And the democracy did not go down there. And I do think that children are way better protected in those countries compared to Germany. Also, I would like to speak about the crimes committed abroad from Germans committed abroad. I've spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe. This is a new area for the pedophile people. Thinking of Ukraine, we need to do more in order to prosecute also German perpetrators committing crimes abroad. There are a lot of people, a high number of people who were never uncovered, and there is need for action also there. During my last visit in Moldova, I talked to a lawyer together with Benjamin Lupp. He set the task for himself to look for children in Moldova who were missed. He was very successful. He found 3 small children. He found them in Belgium. But these 3 children drew paintings, of buildings with other children being captured in those pedophile groups. And even more dramatic is the situation in Moldova, where really huge numbers of children were missed from orphanages that were empty from one day to the other. Nobody knows where these children are. And in the Ukraine, the situation is even worse. Thousands of street children are living in the streets. They are not orphans. They live on the streets in Russia and in Ukraine. At the very beginning, there's vodka, and then you have domestic violence. And children suffer from domestic violence, as well as the women. The children go away. They are sent to orphanages. But these institutions in Ukraine and in Russia, the children are only kept there. It might be even worse than at home. They flee again, and whether they want it or not, they live in the underground of Odessa and Moscow, and the pimps they get hold of them, and they end up in the pornographic industry. And especially in the Ukraine, we have a lot of pornographic industry, and also the Russian pornographic industry moved towards the East Ukraine. Why? Because there are 10,000s of children living in the streets. Nobody is asking about these children. They are left to their own devices, and these are the children that are used for trash films, hardcore pornography, with terrible ways of treatments, and also films where the children are killed. So this is the ideal target group for them, children that nobody cares about. So, in my view, the perpetrators are active on an international level, and we have to become active on an international level as well. In Belgium, the children from Ukraine were found. So no matter where the children come from, it's a European problem. It's our problem. We have to solve it together. Who else would take care of those children? And the children, no matter where they come from, they have the same hopes and the same dreams. They're born with the same hopes and dreams like our children. And I do believe that we are responsible for them. What you mentioned with regard to my book, Sex Slavery of Women in Germany, and we really need to acknowledge that we have a share of 90% of prostitutes that are coming from abroad. Let us ask why. And we need to ask why and how do they come to Germany. So these are 3 important important phases, the facilitators that try to recruit them, and oftentimes violence plays a role, or fake jobs. A dream job in Germany is offered, and then they end up in prostitution. And then with regard to the facilitators, they create dependence. And in Germany, these women end in prostitution. And if we take a closer look, if we take a really closer look, and if we want to take a closer look, we see something that should not be possible in a democracy. Sexual exploitation of these women to an extent that should not be the case in our country. I'm happy to sign the petition. It's the right approach, even though I would have involved not only the Federal Criminal Police Office, but the police all over Germany, because hints arrive everybody, and hints are processed everywhere in the different police departments and offices. And we need to upstaff the police investigators, special investigators for this type of crime. We need to work on that. The petition moves towards the right direction, and I'm happy to sign it. Thank you so much, Manfred Paulus. Thank you for signing the petition. And you, in the audience, you can sign the petition, mission-hilft.de/Schutzengel/petition. You can find the petition there. So my question goes to the director. What about the line to the Philippines? Because at this point, we wanted to open the discussion. I see Father Shea and Roy Deason. Wonderful. That's great. So everybody is online and is there. So first of all, let's move on to the Philippines. The children that were freed, oftentimes they don't consider themselves victims. Why is that? Because from a German perspective, or from the Western perspective, terrible things happen to them. Does the family play a role also? Roy Deason, this question goes to you.
Question nga kung number ko na yung role ang family sa kanang pagpros kan sa level kan ilang buhat.
Sige, you answer.
Dili ko man gusto yung
Ako yung question?
Dili kay pang-answer.
Oh, sige, question.
Kuan nga kanang
Please excuse a little.
Sa family ko no ba nako ko sila influence sa katong ibuhat nga slavery o kuan.
Nga sila?
Influence
Influence sa ibuhat nga?
slavery o kuan sa pag-abuso sa bata.
Nga sila influence?
Oh, naga sila nakuha ba influence.
Nga mo buhat o alay nga abuso?
Kana nga abuso. Kadang sabi mo sa
People are still discussing. Maybe we continue in Germany, because I have here questions from the internet. And one of the question is just a question from Malaysia. Recently, 400,000 people from a pedophile group have been uncovered, and from Boys Town, only 4 men were actually imprisoned and prosecuted. So this is a question with regard to international law enforcement. This question goes to you, Mr. Paul. Please respond briefly. How can we improve that? Because as you mentioned, the problem is the global network of deeds and of crimes and of perpetrators. In fact, there are different problems. There are states where law enforcement works well, where the police departments of different countries work together, and there are countries where this doesn't work or works less. And I think we need to improve that. When I was still active, I always focused on things that we did not only write things down, but I flew over, taking care of getting the proof and the evidence that I need for a law enforcement. So there are deficits, there are gaps that we need to close. But when it comes to problematic countries like in Eastern Europe, many things improved there. The international cooperation works pretty well in this area. But we also have to see that the legal situation is different from country to country. And they have a different criminal code than we do. They focus on different details than we do. And this is why I do believe that pimps and abusers, they fly around the world, and the police needs to fly around the world as well. They need to get hold of the evidence, and we need to improve that. Thank you so much. So let's go to the Philippines, to Father Shea. Father Shea, what do
Hello,
you
yes.
think? How can we manage that the German authorities and local authorities work together when it comes to the law enforcement with regard and prosecution with regard to the perpetrators? What do you think? What is your advice?
Our process in the Philippines, we have a straightforward way of bringing people to justice. We have to, once we get a tip off or we get an information that children are being abused, either by Filipinos or by foreigners, by Germans, immediately we have the authority to go with a Filipino social worker from the government and a policewoman, and we go to immediately rescue that child. Now, that child taken into care and custody of the Preda home, and they're usually, as you earlier, if there's two ways. If they are a victim of child sexual abuse online, they might be very young and they need to be empowered. And so if they're victims of sexual abuse in the home, they also need to be empowered, but they are quite talkative. And those at that age, they do consider themselves as victims, and they get empowered through our therapy program, and they become very articulate in the courtroom. And whether it's a foreigner or a local, we get convictions in that way. We have an average of about 18 convictions every year of these child sex abusers. And just addressing your other issue, some of the girls who are victims of human trafficking, they are different. Those girls have already been brainwashed by their parents, their relatives, to become sex workers, and they're told you're good for nothing else. There's nothing in life for you. This is the way you'll make money. You get cell phones, you get food and drink, so they believe this is all that they have for life. So when they're rescued, they resent it. They don't see themselves as victims. They see themselves as profiteering sex workers, even though they're only 14, 15, 16. So they need a lot of conviction. They need a lot of therapy, and of course the art of persuasion that they are good people, that are not to look down on themselves as sex workers, and that they have dignity, and they should take interest in their studies. And we succeed, about 50 to 60% success rate.
Father Shea, thank you so much for that information, and also for creating awareness for the fact that the victims, at least a part of them, don't see themselves as victims, but as people who contribute to the family income. But the children suffer. They need therapy for many years. Peter Dupont, does it make sense to focus on the perpetrators only? Nein, natürlich.
More specifically, because many of the facilitators are family of the children, so you have to have a holistic approach. You take the customers, as we call them in the online business. You have the facilitators, and you have the children. What I see is that often this is embedded in a community, and the community profits from this by borrowing out, by lending out their children for sex work, as they see it, to a family that is organizing it. Now, it is important to to deal with that family quickly. Why? Because they get successful, they get money, and then you see that the phenomenon is spreading. Other families are also adopting that business model for work, and you see it spreading in a barangay over there. Yeah.
Okay.
So that is prevention, education, yes, but also I would suggest like use people, have social workers who visit these families, tell them we have evidence, tell them what is going to happen to them. With other cases, they know, mostly they know cases where people disappear in jail for life or for 26 years, and make them, let them know what's at stake. Yeah? And then maybe you can start changing something. Yeah.
Vielen Dank, Peter Dupont. Roy Deason, ich versuche es nochmal mit einer Frage.
Roy Deason, let me try again. How important is education for the families? How important is education for the families?
Education for the families.
Okay, excuse me for the first question. I wasn't very clear to me. So how education is important for the family? You know, in our work, because missio supported some students to proceed to their schooling, and now because of this support, one or a number of our students have finished their college degree and they are able to land a stable job. And so they are protected from being exploited. And they have also helped their younger brothers and sisters to continue their schooling. So education is really important, the formal ones. And the informal ones, which is seminars, training, and focus group discussions, are equally important for parents and for the children, because through these methods, they are being made aware of the modus operandi of the facilitators, and they are also made aware of the dangers of the internet and of what is happening to their body, and respect of their dignity as persons. They will realize that through the seminars and training. Among the poor people, it seems that respect for one's body and respect for one's person is not that really valued, because even in the family, domestic violence is very, very apparent, and much more for the poor because of the financial difficulties and lack of means to survive. So the anger, the pin-up emotions is very strong, and they show that in their relationship with one another, and then the children would become the victims. And so the being as a person is not much valued. And that is why when it comes to online sexual abuse, those children are very vulnerable. And when their chat mates would show them care, would show them affection, and they would be given some things that they aspire, they equate that as being love. So, see, if we have this education, they will be aware that these are deceits. These are not really true affection, but just a means to exploit them, to manipulate them.
Thank you very much. That shows how important education is in this context. Peter Dupont, I have a question from Anonymous. That's too bad. I would have liked to know who asked that question. The question is the following. You are an investigative journalist. Your work is very dangerous because you are attacking the perpetrators directly. Are you threatened? Do they try to hinder you from doing your work?
It's a traumatizing job also, and very scary. In the beginning, it was less scary than it is now, because you get known in certain environments, and you have people, of course, who are threatening you, who want to kill you also. You have, as Herr Paulus told us before, Some police is less dependable than other law enforcement agencies. So in the Philippines, that can be a problem. For example, they can arrest you to get money, or for other reasons you never know. Often police is connected to the people you are investigating, so you always have to be very careful. Now with the UCF, we have this method that we never operate alone. We are in team. We always have a shadow. And very important, we always have our local people. Without local people, you cannot go undercover. You cannot build up long-term covers. So that is extremely important. But I think it's the same for law enforcement who is dealing specifically with this. It's traumatizing. In the end, it's wearing you down because you are staring in the face of evil. It's really evil. Yeah? And you have to learn how to deal with it, and you have to learn also at a certain moment how to get out quickly. Yeah. The biggest problem that we encounter is often how do we deal with law enforcement, with police. It operates differently in many countries. In some countries, they are more open, less conservative. As police people told me, if you have the law in one hand, you often lose the investigation because they are limited, they have a strict context. And we, for example, can operate outside of it. But how do you relate to police then? What law enforcement agency do you contact? What data do they need? Sometimes, can you really trust them? Because there might be, especially in countries like the Philippines, that some law enforcement agencies from abroad who are there, they might have another agenda. So you have to be really moving very carefully along in the arena.
Okay, thank you very much. So, das ist eine sehr gefährliche und wichtige Arbeit.
So it's a very dangerous and very important work. You often feel small when you're dealing in this context. And I mean, today we are having this conference, and I would just like to say thank you that you actually enter those dangerous situations in order to stop those people. I would like to go back to Roy Deason. I would like to talk to you, Roy. You work on the cemetery, and you work with people, with children and families who live in the cemetery. What's the situation like on the cemetery?
Situation cemetery. The situation in the cemetery. The situation in the cemetery now has become, what we say, more miserable than before. Because of the COVID-19, the visitors in the cemetery are in a way being curtailed. And during the celebration of the All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, the vendors are being driven outside in order to contain the COVID. You know, our cemetery has very small entrance and at the same time exit. So they have to curtail that. And then the students, the children are helping their parents with livelihood through the selling of the candles and flowers, and also with the making of the smoke. We have this practice that before going out of the cemetery, you have to cross over the smoke in order to ward off the spirits from going to your homes with you. And the children are very vulnerable for abuses, and the children are roaming around naked because of lack of water and lack of proper waste disposal. So they just go around in the cemetery for their disposal, and they go around naked. And if there are some unscrupulous individuals with high-end phones, they can always take pictures of those naked children. But we are trying to educate the parents to really have their garments on on the children, but their rationale is that it's difficult because they lack the water and they don't have money to buy the detergents, the soap, to wash the clothes. And the other situation in the cemetery is that they are really in need of support. And right now, we have stopped our feeding program because our missio is supporting the feeding program, but there are so many children in the cemeteries. And so some of them are not being included in the program. And for their schooling, they have difficulty with the modular lessons. Our country is in modular lessons because of COVID. And our parents have less education. And their children who are in high school, their parents who are in the elementary grade, they cannot really teach the children. And they lack the gadgets in order to communicate with the teachers about their lessons. So, in fact, the parents are very upset, and they are also at the same time stressed out since they have a number of children and all are in modular lessons. It's difficult for them. ANSI is trying to help them through tutorials. But what can we do with so many families in the cemetery? And right now, the people in the cemetery, they are having difficulty with their livelihood, with their relationship in the family, that because of the financial situation, the emotional stability, emotional health is a challenge, and they have also this educational support that they are anxious what will happen to their children, what will happen when they will grow up. And there are a number of children who have stopped schooling actually because of these modular lessons that they find difficult. When George was visiting the cemetery, it wasn't as dirty as it is now. Now it has become dirtier, and maybe it's because of the difficulty in maintaining the cleanliness due to lack of water, and also due to the COVID-19, which people are not allowed to really go out and roam around. Well, it's difficult life for them.
Thank you, Roy Deason. Thank you for sharing these experiences with us. Father Shea, I would like to address you right now, and I would like to ask you, there are therapeutic centers where children and young people can go and they were helped there. Maybe you can share some success stories with us.
Well, yes, we have many of the shelters in the central Luzon have been closed for the last year because of the pandemic. And but Preda, we've stayed open, and because we took special precautions to protect the staff and the children, and we were able to receive many of the child victims. However, about 2 months ago, we were able to conduct an undercover operation in a hotel in Olongapo, Olongapo City. We rescued the 6 girls from there. They have now progressed in their therapy and having their court cases. And they have successfully testified in their cases, which we hope will lead to more convictions. So, as I was saying earlier, it's really working to empower the victim, because the victim is the witness, and you cannot win a court case without the testimony, the strong, clear testimony of these girls. So we have quite a few, success stories of the girls who are able to testify. And as I said earlier, we have 3-year-old and a 6-year-old successfully testifying, to bring about the conviction of the abusers. So what else can we do but only to provide these shelters and to protect the children from outside interference? Because many of the abusers threaten us. We get these threats and they want to get the children out if they're fairly, shall I say, rich person. They hire people to try and abduct the children from our center because they know that if the child will testify, usually they win the case. So this is more of the big actions. However, we would like to say, if I can, we should discuss something about the online abuse of children is not possible without the enabling and the empowering of internet by the ISPs. And this is affecting Germany and all over Europe. They are connected to the Philippine telecommunications internet. And sad to say, there is only one charity we know of, that is the International Watch Foundation, who is really trying to clean the internet. But the ISPs, the telecommunications corporations, who are all linked together by providing connections to each other, do not participate in this. And I think they are sort of enabling criminal activity. So that's part of our ongoing campaign. We would like to see that as part of our petition, that they would, in Germany, NGOs, church groups would stand up and really, we have to change the culture of the telecommunications. Change maybe this 302 section.
That's a very important appeal. Thank you for that. You're right. The platforms, the ISPs need to be held accountable. They cannot say, hey, I'm only providing the platform, no matter what people use the platforms for. But to go back to law enforcement, in the run-up to this meeting, Roy Deason told me that they had a picture of one perpetrator. We're not going to show it, but it's really overwhelming for NGOs and people in general. What can I do with this picture? Should I mail it to the Federal Criminal Police Office? What do I do? What is your recommendation?
Get a lot of tips. They're mostly underfinanced. Have the means to deal with every tip they get. So, things like this is our job at the Underground Child Foundation. We get, for example, a photo and a story, and then what we do is we make the information hard. We're going to look online. It's called OSINT, Open Source Intelligence. What we can find about this, and if you can make a file about this, if what's being told is correct, because you don't go to the police, it's innocent. And then with the case, go to the police. We Europol, Philippine National Police, even based in Cebu. We know a prosecutor there that helps us with cases like that. So we work on two fronts. It's like on the Philippines and also, for example, in Germany or whatever that it's happening. And mostly we see that particular thing is having results.
Großartig. Liebe Teilnehmende, wenn Sie mehr Informationen...
Wonderful. Dear audience, if you want to have more information on the organization of Peter Dupont, you can find it on the website of Missio. Manfred Paulus, what is your take? You have a picture, you have a suspicion. What should I do? Well, the question is, do I need to investigate globally or only in Europe? But the Federal Criminal Police Office and Europol and Interpol are responsible, and they have identification programs to identify the person. They have files with the data of perpetrators already collected where they can identify say the people, so these are the right people to approach. The Federal Criminal Police Office, Interpol, and Europol, depending on the case and the situation. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was a very interesting round. And before closing this panel, I would like to thank Father Shea and Roy Giesen in the Philippines. You so enriched our discussion with the many information. I admire you for your wonderful work. And I would be delighted if we could join forces to implement a world, one world, no slavery, and make sure that things change. There were a lot of questions that were asked with regard to forced prostitution. And I would like to tell everybody that we are going to dedicate ourselves this afternoon to the topic. And we will be having Dr. Maria Decker of Solvodi here with us, solidarity with women in distress. And we will also go to Australia to a physician, and she is a executive officer, and she will share about the Modern Slavery Act in Germany, similar to the Supply Chain Act in Germany. At the very beginning, I asked people about their attitude, and we have a survey, and I would like to take a look at the survey.
All right, so we are seeing the results right now, okay? So the most responses said yes, the law is good, but only if it is supplemented or tightened. So yeah, so it's a step into the right direction, I guess. Thank you again, Mr. Paulus. Thank you, Mr. Dupont, for participating. Thank you for your input.